All right, hey there. This is Mr. Everton, obviously, with my coffee, and this is a video about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm unfortunately not able to be there today, which is why I'm giving you this video lecture. You should have already watched the crash course video, which will go over much of what I'm about to go over, but I thought it'd be good for you to hear it from two different people, and then there's a reading for you to do afterwards, a couple of them. So let's get started. We're going to be comparing Zionist and Arab perspectives on the Palestine-Israel conflict. So for most of this class, the country that is today called Israel was part of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire was extremely diverse. There were many different religious and ethnic groups that lived within the Ottoman Empire, and Jews and Christians both, as we discussed, had sort of a privileged status in the Ottoman Empire because they were known as people of the book, or dhimmi, because they were also monotheistic. Muslims, accorded them a certain amount of respect. They set up legal systems, like the millet system was set up so that if you were Jewish and you lived in the Ottoman Empire, you could live according to Jewish law, and you would have Jewish people representing you in the government. So very tolerant, right? And in the John Green video, he talks specifically about how in Palestine during this time, Muslims would celebrate Passover with their Jewish neighbors, and Jews would celebrate Eid with their Muslim neighbors. So it was very cordial. People got along. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire dissolved. It stopped existing. I'll just back up for a quick second. It turned into places like the new independent country of Turkey. Greece got its independence. Lots of territories in Southeast Europe got their independence. Egypt became a protectorate, basically, of Great Britain because Great Britain liked the canal. But in the Middle East, they developed what they called the mandate system. And they called it this because the British and the French said that they didn't believe that the people of this area were able to run their own governments, that they weren't equipped yet, that they were not sophisticated or civilized enough to be in charge of a government. And so they created mandates, Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, which would become Iraq today. And they governed these people and said that, we'll give you your independence later on down the road. This plan was drawn up by a French diplomat named Picot and an English diplomat named Sykes, and it's called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And they just literally drew some lines on the map of the Middle East and decided what future countries were going to look like, which is never great. It's not what we want. So Zionism really took off in the early 20th century, and it was advocated for by this man, Theodor Herzl. Zionism is the belief that Jewish people have a shared nationality. It's not just a religion, right? But it's an ethnicity. And it's the belief that these people have the right to a homeland in what was Palestine. And so during this time period, tons of Jewish people began migrating to Palestine because they want to establish Jewish communities in Palestine. You can see from this chart, an estimated 376,000 Jewish immigrants mostly from Europe moved to Palestine between 1920 and 1946. That's a lot of people. And when all of those people move there, then suddenly those people have a claim to we deserve our own government, right? They're moving there because in the Bible, it says that God gave this land to the Jewish people. And so all of these people are moving there. And now they're there. They're like, we should be able to have a Jewish government because we're Jewish people, and that's important to us. So, of course, at the end of World War II, the Allies discover the full extent to what was the Holocaust, right? And they are trying to get European Jews back to the places where they lived, try to resettle them in their homes. But that proved really incredibly difficult. There were, it's hard to even comprehend this, right? Because we think of the Holocaust and we're like, well, wow, everybody must have felt so bad for the Jews. But there was still a ton of anti-Semitism. So in places like Poland, after the war was over, Jewish people who had survived the Holocaust survivors, were coming back to their communities and facing violence from people who didn't want them to come back. So there was a pogrom that killed people in Poland in 1946. So in 1948, the newly formed United Nations creates, as its first act of business, comes up with a plan to deal with this question of who should govern Palestine. They create two states. They divide what was Palestine in half. They cut it in half. They create a Jewish and an Arab state. Now, this is an example of a trend in world history after World War II of new boundaries forming because of cultural differences. We also saw this happen with Pakistan and India. So, similar to how Berlin was really important in Germany, they also divided Jerusalem. So they gave territory, the tan territory, to a proposed Arab state that would be Palestine. They gave the blue territory to the proposed Jewish state. And then the Jewish state got West Jerusalem, and the Muslim state got, the Arab state got East Jerusalem. In 1948, all of the people of, the Arab people surrounding Israel were all the Muslims were incredibly upset by this because they're taking land away from Muslims and they're giving it to Jewish people, right? The Muslims are just like, oh, you're colonizing us again. Great. Thank you for that. So in 1948, there is a war where basically everybody surrounding Israel attacks Israel. And they refuse to admit that Israel has a right to exist. Israel defeats them and takes more land away from what would have been the Arab state. Now you can see the purple places on the map are places that used to be Muslim and now are being controlled by Israel. Before I get to the reading, this would continue for most of the end of the 20th century. Egypt, for a large part of this time, was leading the Arab push to reject the formation of Israel until 1979, when Egypt made a deal with Israel to stop doing that. And then since then, Palestinians have been, it's overly complex. I don't want to get into the weeds of it, but an organization called the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the PLO for short, took over the leadership of Palestine at that point. You're going to read two perspectives. You're going to read a Muslim perspective by the Muslim historian Tamim Ansari, from his book that I really like, Destiny Disrupted. And I'll give you the Muslim perspective on Israel-Palestine. And then you're going to read a couple excerpts, a couple pages from the U.S. Holocaust Museum that will give you some insight into the Jewish perspective on Israel-Palestine. And then when you're done, you have some questions that you need to answer. And yeah, that's the lesson. I hope that you felt like I handled this very tricky topic in an equitable, fair, even-handed kind of way. I definitely am not trying to push either side here. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.